no one was like taking the baton, and leading the charge. So I thought that I would organize, some of the brightest minds, of science, of nutrition, of medical and health and recipes and industrial design and product design and farmers. So I've just been spending the last 5 years not only writing and sharing about sprouts, but working with how this can become more accessible, more affordable.
Hi, I'm Brilliant, your host for this show. I know that I'm incredibly blessed. As the son of self-made billionaires, I've seen the high price some people pay for success, and I've learned that money really can't buy happiness. But I've also had the good fortune to learn directly from many of the world's leading teachers. If you're ready to be, do, have, and give more, this podcast is for you. When I started this podcast years ago, the central question was, what does it mean to live a good life and how can we do it? That's a question that I'm interested in personally, and I know that many people are interested in. But it's hard to know where to start. My guest today can help. His name is Doug Evans. He is a pioneer in the natural food industry. He recently published the Sprout book, Tap into the Power of the Planet's Most Nutritious Food. I'm privileged to have him here in the studio in person today. And we talk about all kinds of things related to sprouting, why to do it, how to do it, favorite recipes, what Doug's health journey has been like, and why. If you're looking to improve the quality of your life, if you're looking to feel better, if you're looking to have more energy, if you're looking to have the capacity to give more of the gifts that are perhaps latent within you, I think that what Doug is talking about can help. So you can learn more about Doug and his work at dougevans.com. You can find him on Instagram or TikTok. But I do hope that you'll look into what Doug is sharing and that you will use it to improve the quality of your life. With that, I hope you enjoy this conversation with my friend, Doug Evans. Mr. Doug Evans, welcome to the School for Good Living podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Brilliant.
I'm glad you are. Will you tell me, please, what is life about?
I mean, life is about whatever you choose to make it about, under whatever circumstance and whatever hand you're dealt. Like, life is the meaning that you give to it.
And what have you chosen to make your life about?
I mean, for me, the first part of my life was just figuring out, like, why am I here? What's going on? Managing those voices in my head. Now that I'm clear, I look at how I can make contribution, how I can make service, how I can make the world healthier, people healthier, how I could, contribute to more compassionate living. And so the vehicle for that, for me, other than my voice, is speaking for the sprouts, speaking for seeds.
Well, I know you've written the book that we've got right here, the Sprout book, Tap into the Power of the Planet's Most Nutritious Food. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But Doug, I don't know that I've told you this. I don't know if you realize that you are the answer to a prayer for me personally.
Oh, tell me.
Yeah. So last year in 2022, I did an inventory of the previous year I had lived. And I realized that it was not satisfactory for me. I wasn't as happy or as healthy as I know I could be. And I made a commitment that 2023 would be the best year of my life. So I'd go from this kind of lackluster year to the best year of my life. And I didn't know how I would do it. I didn't have a strategy. I only had an intention. And it was only a few weeks into the new year. And our common friend, Elliot, I was on a call with him, and you called him right then, and he introduced me to you. And my life already has changed in some pretty significant ways just from the last few weeks of interacting with you.
Wow. Well, thank you. And I guess there are no coincidences, and you are attracting, what you need to attract in your life.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you and I have a little bit of a similar background from the standpoint of people that we love, people who are close to us, made some lifestyle choices or maybe had some genetics and ultimately ended up in a pretty bad place health-wise.
Yes.
Right? And for me, it was my dad when he prioritized his work above almost everything in his life for a long time, ended up with diabetes and many other ailments, had his legs amputated below the knees, and seeing him in that way changed me forever. Made me certain that I did not want that to ever happen to me. And not only did I not want that for me, I wanted to support and encourage others to live a healthy life. And I know you had, like I said, some similar kinds of experiences, parents, aunts, siblings.
Yeah,
Will you tell me about your journey to eating well and to living good living?
Yeah. So we grew up lower middle class with food scarcity. So there wasn't a lot of food in the house. Everything was dished out in rations. And then when I was in the Army, I overate processed junk food. And then when I had money and I got out of the Army and I had freedom, like I was using food as a reward system for me. So I was overweight, not obese, but overweight. But I was eating really food that was triggering the pleasure sensors in your brain. So everything was processed, refined, meat, dairy, animal products, added oils, sugars, sweeteners.
Pretty typical American diet.
Salt. Yeah, exactly. And then, I was slowly and comfortably, becoming overweight. So I was about 36 pounds overweight, but still functioning. I would be tired in the middle of the afternoon. But then when my aunt got diabetes and they did a double amputation of her feet below her ankles, that was a real oh my God, do we have genetically diabetes in our family? And then she died of diabetes. And then my uncle died of heart disease. And then my mother got stomach cancer and died. And my father got heart disease and died. And then my brother became overweight, obese, diabetic, atrial fibrillation, hypertension, and had the first of 3 strokes and a heart attack. So I just thought hey, we're screwed. I'm screwed. I have bad genes. Yeah. And then, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will come. So in the most unforeseen circumstance, like New York City nightclub, middle of the night, randomly, hitting on a woman, and turns out she was a vegan. And I never heard the term vegan before. I thought it was short for vegetarian or slang. And she explained to me about whole food, plant-based diet. And she was moving and curious about raw. I was like, oh, wow. What are you talking about? And I couldn't even fathom a day without pizza, pasta, meat, chicken, or fish. I just couldn't even imagine that. Dairy, cheese. I remember buying the blocks of cheese and just biting into them.
Yeah, I often say that cheese is how I know God loves me. So I went 10 years not eating meat, but veganism is another level. And I don't know that I'll ever go there, but I'm interested to learn more about your experience.
Yeah. Well, so in a 2-week period, I went cold cucumber. So I stopped eating all cooked food, processed food, refined food, meat, dairy, animal products. And I went from eating all that junk to vegetarian, vegan, raw vegan in this 2-week window.
Wow. How did you do it? I mean, I heard you say there was a woman involved. So I know it's not just that. But,
no, well, the woman kind of lit the match, but I was the fuse. And I rapidly exceeded where she was dietarily, not in a competitive form with her, but I was grasping the information, and it made so much sense that everything that you put in your mouth was this life or death decision.
Yeah.
And so when I became cognizant, awake, and aware, then I could no longer, in good conscience, ignore that information. So when I hear you right now saying oh, I don't know if I could ever be vegan.
Yeah.
If you, with your brilliance, delved deep into the data and into the sentient values, into the global implications of climate and environment, it would be incomprehensible for you to deviate. And, I think that's like the point for me. It's like not even like a choice. Like last night, you served this beautiful dinner, and then, they passed out crack on the table, right? Sugar, yeah. Chocolate covered almonds, chocolate chip cookies, refined, like raw chocolate bars and the like. And I'm looking at
none of which I ate because you didn't either, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
If you weren't there, I think I would have. But
yeah, well, I'm looking at it, and like my mouth was salivating like a teenage boy in a in a strip bar, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm saying, I want to eat the whole plate. Yeah. I want to eat all of it, and so then I'm like, oh, every temptation resisted makes me stronger. There's no fucking way. Like I'm not going to touch it. Yeah. And then afterwards, like I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, is there anything else for me to eat? And then like I'm touching my stomach, I'm touching my thighs, and I'm like, wow, I'm not hungry. Like I have enough nourishment. I don't need to do that. Yeah. And so much of the mind like is playing tricks on you, and it's a constant test. Yeah. But for me, when I understood like the atrocities, like there's no, like, I don't want to make this about veganism per se, but like there is no humane way to kill a being that wants to live, right? And there's no difference between your cat, that sweet little cat that's scratching up your beautiful chairs, or the dog or the horse or the cow or the deer. Like these are beings that want to live. And, to become, like a killer and to take a knife or a gun or electric prod and then tear them apart is just a indication of the state of affairs in global consciousness of war, separation, differentiation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I do think that we will look back in time and realize that some of the things we are now doing are things that they'll just no longer be socially acceptable. That's my theory.
Yeah.
Right. But I want to go a little bit of a different direction based on something you said, which in the book, you make this statement that the most powerful tool you have to change your brain and your health is your fork.
That's right.
Right? Food is not just calories or energy. Food contains information that talks to your genes, turning them on or off, and affecting their function moment to moment. And as you talk about food being this, not just calories or energy, but not all food is equivalent, as we well know. Right?
That's right.
And you have discovered, as have many others, but I think you're lighting a fire around sprouts specifically. Now, I had never really thought of sprouts at all. It's not something I shop for. It's not something I'll eat if they're available. But if I ever did, it was maybe a garnish, or something like that. But I've been on a FaceTime with you around dinner time, and I've seen your entire dinner is sprouts, right? Tell me about how and why did you develop such a deep love of sprouts?
So I was turned on to sprouts and sprouting 25 years ago. And I felt the power of them and the energy of them, right? And the miracle of them. And I somewhat like just pushed it to the side. And when it became available, like I would eat it. And then when I moved to Wonder Valley Hot Springs in 2018, right? I bought the land in 2017. I moved there 2018. I realized not only was I in the Mojave Desert, I was in a food desert. And that in order to eat the way I want to eat, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, seaweeds, and sprouts, like that's the framework of what I'm willing to eat. I would either A, have to drive an hour and a half each way to go to Whole Foods, or further if I wanted to go to farms, or I'd have to figure out how to be sovereign, how I could grow my own food. And turns out it's really difficult to have an organic garden in the desert or anywhere for that matter, right? And it could take weeks or months or years or never to get that thing going. And then while I'm hallucinating in the hot springs, looking at the galaxies and beyonds, I'm seeing the constellations of the stars twinkling. And I got the download from the universe that was so simple. And I think you'll remember this for the rest of your life. Sprouts are vegetables, right? That was number one.
Yeah.
Number two, sprouts were vitamins and minerals and nourishment. Number two. And number three, sprouts were medicine that could treat both chronic and acute illnesses. And I didn't really understand like what this all meant. Like this was surface level boom. And then the next day, it kind of unleashed me into this kind of obsessive searching for information about sprouts. And sprouts are really a label for a seed that is germinated and it's becoming a seedling and like a little green, and it's growing, it's beginning its journey. And it turns out that this seed is a complete dormant living organism, right? It may feel like a pebble or you could break your tooth on it, but it has an endosperm, it has an embryo, it has life force in it, sitting almost like in hibernation, in dormancy. And with as little effort as a little water, you remove the enzyme inhibitors, the trypsins, the lectins, and you trigger the germination process, which causes this seed to burst into life. And then it's growing at a rapid speed where it may grow 2, 4, 6, 8 times its volume in 1 week without soil, without sunshine, without fertilizer. It's sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and it's growing its dry mass. So it's not just growing water volume, it's increasing its dry mass.
How does it do that?
I mean, like, it's just a miracle.
Yeah, in fact, that's another statement from your book. It feels magical, but there's no actual magic involved. It's nature at its best.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the fact that we get to eat that, like, and what people don't know is that every single sprout contains every single amino acid to form a complete protein. That sprouts contain micronutrients, phytonutrients, polyphenols, bioflavonoids,
I don't even know what
prebiotics.
It's amino acids.
This is the essence, of what the human body thrives on. So you could be a sproutivore. You could be a sproutarian. You could incorporate this superfood into your diet. And it turns out that sprouts are probably the number one food for regulating insulin levels in diabetics. Sprouts are the number one food for weight loss because they are high fiber, low fat, low calories, and super nutrients. So while you're consuming the sprouts, you are naturally doing a caloric restrictive diet while the body is burning off its excess fat and its sludge. And you're seeing these transformations. But it's so antithetical to how the food industry works. Like, you go into Whole Foods, there's 30,000 products on the shelves. 99.9% of those have additives, have preservatives, have been cooked, have been processed, have been refined, have added sweeteners, flavors, artificial flavors, natural flavors, preservatives, and to me, not worthy of consumption by this guy. And so when I thought about sprouts, and I lived on sprouts for 30 days, And I didn't know what was going to happen. But what happened is literally I reconstructed, like every cell in my body was influenced by this super nutritious living food.
Wow.
And like that was just the beginning. So now, like you asked me, like, what about sprouts? So I'm not recommending or encouraging you to just eat only sprouts, although you would thrive, right? You would thrive. But add sprouts to anything and everything that you're eating. Add sprouts before or after every meal or with every meal.
Yeah.
And you're going to start to see a transformation, because what happens if you're eating food that is processed, that has added salt, oil, and sugar, it's highly addictive and it's devoid of true nutrients.
Yeah. You know, a few years ago, I read a book, not even sure why I picked this one up, but it's a book called The Secret Life of Plants. And in the book, the author made the point, if I remember correctly, understood it correctly, that the reason that many processed foods will stay good for years is because they're devoid of life. Anything that has life in it will decay, like a plant, you know,
Right.
or even once we slaughter meat and so forth, that will decay very quickly because the life energy is leaving. But it's why a Twinkie or even like a McDonald's hamburger can sit on a shelf literally for years and not look any different at the end of it, and not even necessarily decay. So this idea that if we're eating something that's rich with a life energy, and I know some of that can start to sound woo-woo, but then there's another part that makes perfect sense. That it's like, hey, this thing is full of life, and if I eat that, that life will become me. Doug, I've heard you say that in order for the body to really extract or maximize the nutrients in our food, ultimately it has to turn it into liquid.
It has to be liquid. So if you think about breast milk, is able to totally satisfy the nutrients of a rapidly developing, human being.
Right.
That if we're eating things that are predominantly water-based, nutrient-based, like fiber, there's two types of fiber: soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber gets absorbed. Insoluble fiber helps create a healthy movement, but it also is food for the microbiome. And this is a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down, but we have more non-human, alien RNA, DNA in our microbiome than there's human DNA in the whole body. So you have like 5 pounds of foreign, alien, living organisms in the body. And you feed that fiber, and it's really happy. You feed it junk, and it controls the brain. I mean, the stomach, brain, gut, brain connection is very, very powerful and very true. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we can go down. But what happens is these cravings come not from like someone who's weak or they have bad thoughts in the brain. Like what you eat in the microbiome will control your behavior and make you eat more of the poison to feed it. And that's why when people talk about cleanses and detoxing and water fasting and dry fasting, the point is to kill those bad microbiome and give yourself a fresh start.
Well, let me just ask you about that a little bit, because my sense is I'm a skeptic in a lot of ways, right? And I know there's so much information. So the question I'm trying to get to is, how do you know what to believe when it comes to health or what to eat or how to do it? Like, how do you personally pursue that?
I feel that we all know.
There's like an intuitive knowing.
Yeah, there's a knowing.
Right.
And if you like intuitively just go into silence and be present and ask yourself a question, like, what happens is this cognitive dissonance that occurs and the separation between where our food comes from and when we eat it just becomes kind of standard and matter of fact. Like, oh, here's a burger, here's some chips, here's a hot dog, here's some cereal, fortified, good marketing. But if you think about that, like, I can't imagine you going to, the field and tearing into a live cow, right? And eating it alive, with your bare hands and eating the flesh.
Well, no, I would use my teeth.
Yeah. But even still, like,
Sure.
I can't imagine you wrestling with a cow. Like, it's just crazy. And I can't imagine you as a grown man, on your knees, suckling off of, a cow's teat, like drinking the milk, that hairy, like, teat. I mean, you may, like, just not happening. But what happens is they put it in a glass, they pasteurize it, they put it in a box, they put, fancy marketing on it.
Yeah.
And it's subsidized by the government. It fits into the whole part. There's lobbyists.
The food pyramid includes it that we've learned from the time we're kids.
So, it's all like about brain. But if you ask yourself, like, what's good for me? Like, what should I eat? And if you know that if you're uncertain, like you're not certain what to do, you can experiment and you can ask yourself, what do I think is the worst thing that could happen if I followed Doug's protocol? Like, if I just listened to Doug, I surrendered to Doug, like, and I did it. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, no, I think you'd be hungry, right? Like, that would be the worst thing. And then you could always revert back to your old way of life. But if you were to incorporate it and all of a sudden you were to see the results and feel lighter, feel more energetic, like lessen the brain fog, tap further into your brilliance, then you would look forward to eating sprouts. You'd look forward to eating fresh, ripe fruit in season, local vegetables grown in organic soil. Like, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to eat a monocrop where they're using genetically modified seeds? Like, the problem isn't so much of GMOs is that they're modifying the seed. The problem is with the GMOs, they're modifying the seeds to be pesticide resistant, so that when it's growing and there's insects on it, they can spray as much pesticide as they want on the plant, and the plant will survive, but the insects will die, so they can get a greater crop. And so what happens is the consumption of pesticides, glyphosate in particular, is a known carcinogen. And they're spraying it like it's everyday, normal things that are going on. So if you ask yourself what to believe, you don't need to ask anybody else. You can just say, do I have a glyphosate deficiency? Right? Do I need this? Like, where does the cow get its protein from? Right? From eating grass, the amino acids in the grass. Like, that's where they're getting it from. So if you want to go to the source and you want to be optimum, you want to be efficient, you want to be brilliant, you go right to the source. And it turns out what makes sprouts really powerful is seeds are really, really powerful. But seeds have enzyme inhibitors on them. Seeds have a hard shell. Seeds are condensed energy. When you soak them, you germinate them, you sprout them, they become more bioavailable. Like, take a simple lentil, right? Part of the legume family, a lentil. When you sprout a lentil, you double the antioxidant levels, you triple the vitamin C, and you quadruple the soluble and insoluble fiber.
Wow.
So you're getting, like, you can have a lentil. Lentils are healthy. They're part of the plant-based diet, vegan diet, vegetarian diets around the world. When you're eating sprouted lentils, it's like, whoa, it's like a whole new level. And if you eat them without salt, oil, or sugar, right, they're crunchy, they have a flavor, they're nutritious. You won't overeat them.
Yeah.
You'll eat just enough.
Well, that's a point that I'm like, how have I lived this long and it has never occurred to me, right? I think my mode up until now has been to eat until I'm full, right? But one of the things that you've helped me become aware of is the simple possibility of not eating until I'm full, but eating until I'm no longer hungry.
That's right.
Right? And I know that's easier with some foods than others, right? Because if I'm filling my belly with processed foods and all this stuff we're talking about that's not so good for us, by the time I feel full, I've way overdone it in terms of not only unhealthy content, but calories, right? But with sprouts, I hear you say, like, you'll be eating sprouts. You can't overeat sprouts.
Yeah, you can't and you won't.
Yeah.
And like the consequence of overeating sprouts is you will have like a gargantuan, like orgasmic poop. Like that's what will happen.
I'm not sure if I want one of those or if I want to stay away from that.
I don't think there's any religious limitation for feeling the sensations of your prostate and your colon in that level, but it's really satisfying. Like it's really satisfying to have that release.
Yeah.
And turns out, animal products have de minimis amounts of fiber, which is why there's a level of constipation, in them.
Yeah.
And then if you think about the number one over-the-counter drugs are antacids, Pepto-Bismol. I can't even think of the Tums, Alka-Seltzer, because of all the acid that's forming in the body when the body is trying to break down these solid forms, as opposed to fruit or sprouts that go through the stomach, into the small intestine, into the colon, and you're extracting the nutrients and you get a good fiber-rich poop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, it's so intuitive. But what happens is you don't listen and act on your intuition when you are a subject of someone else's marketing campaign.
Yeah. Well, plus people are busy, right? And a huge factor in food is convenience. Another factor is cost, right? Another factor, of course, that goes along with convenience is availability. So like what's easy? Then there's the whole thing of what do I understand, right? Where I don't, even though I've read your book, I don't understand from experience how to grow my own sprouts yet. And I understand it's not complicated, but it does take some effort and maybe even more attention to stay on schedule of rinsing and, making sure that I'm using the appropriate substances or not using, things that have dyes or chemicals. But I guess where I'm going with all this is what from your view, like if you could tell somebody something in a minute to get started, what do you say? Like, how do people begin this?
I mean, I would say, without self-promoting the book, right? Sign up for my free newsletter at thesproutbook.com. I'm sharing constant information and responding interactively on Instagram at just Doug Evans. I'm creating content on TikTok, and it's kind of crazy. I was never even on TikTok. I thought of TikTok was like, dog videos and things, but
it is, Doug. And
it's sprouts.
Yeah.
Right. And so 6 months ago, I opened up my TikTok account and like 25 of my videos went viral with 1 million views each, like just going off. I'm so sharing information, but basically the essence is you want to get high quality organic seeds. Okay. You want to get a vessel like a mason jar and they make tops that screw onto them, or you could use cheesecloth and a rubber band. And then you want to use the best water that you can have access to. So I prefer filtered water, spring water, distilled water, and if all else is not available, tap water. And just use the best resources you have. And there's a chapter in my book called Junkyard Dog, where I was taking things out of the recycling bin, out of the garbage, I'm boiling them, sterilizing them, and using them as vessels for sprouting. And the amazing thing is, like, not everyone can be a farmer. Not everyone could be a gardener. Not everyone has a green thumb. but everyone can be a sprouter.
That's awesome. And I just want to read a couple of comments that were, as I was preparing for this interview, and I watched some of the previous interviews you've done, and I read some of the reviews people left on Amazon about your book. Here's one. I bought Doug's book and recommended it to everyone. It's fantastic and my favorite read this summer. I'm currently sprouting broccoli seeds, sunflower seeds, red clover seeds, pea shoots, and growing carrot microgreens. I happily made the investment in the materials I'll need to have fresh sprouts and greens in my home all year round, regardless of supermarket supply. I also love True Leaf. This person mentioned, I also love True Leaf Market for organic seeds and stocked up. My husband is getting on board and adding them to his sandwiches and drinking them in smoothies. Thank you, Doug, for this wisdom. So I realize you probably didn't even read that comment. That was
I don't read. Yeah. I don't read any of that.
Isn't that awesome? That was in the comments of the interview you did on the Spartan podcast.
Wow.
But how great that there are people, right? There's people who are looking for this, and there's people when they find it, they're acting on it, and it's making a difference in their life. And I know from my experience, it's not the kind of thing that I just read in the book and I'm like, oh, I have all this stuff in the cupboard. I'll just get it out and use it. So it is a journey. But as I just wanted to share that with people listening to hear like, hey, there are real people that this is working for. And then also to share with you, because I realize you probably didn't read this woman's comment, but what an awesome thing.
Yeah, it feels so good.
Yeah.
It feels so good. And, April 2023, my sprouting masterclass comes out at Commune. So Commune, .com/sprouts. You could sign up, for the sprouting masterclass. And look, my vision is to, wake the world up, to sprouts.
Yeah.
And that if you think about in the flyover states, there's food insecurity, there are food deserts, that there's no longer an excuse for people not to have high quality nutrition available for pennies a serving.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do want to ask you about your favorite recipe, because I understand you took the advance the publisher gave you for this book, and instead of like buying yourself a new car, which, it wasn't huge, but you spent that whole thing with a recipe developer.
Correct.
Right? To create 40 awesome recipes in this book that I can attest are delicious. Some of them I think I've experienced. But what's your favorite?
I mean, I think that the easiest thing simplest recipe is take garbanzo beans, organic garbanzo beans, sprout them for 3 days, and then add some pickle juice, pickle brine, and a pickle in a blender and make a dip.
Wow.
And then take anything, more sprouts, like you could use other sprouts and dip into your sprouts and use that as a dip, or a crudité, or a homemade flax cracker, or even, a regular cracker to get it. Like the idea is, consuming them. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is like just, less of a recipe, more of a function. Take your broccoli sprouts, freeze them into ice cubes, and every time you're making a smoothie, you have fresh broccoli sprouts on demand. Like we didn't even talk about how broccoli sprouts can have a hermetic effect to create heat shock proteins in the brain.
I have no idea what you just said. What does this mean?
Well, hormesis is like when we do the ice bath, you're lowering the body temperature and the body's working hard, to respond to get the body back to homeostasis.
Right.
Or if you're in a hot bath, hot spring, or sauna, the body's working hard to cool itself.
Sure.
So when you're consuming certain sprouts, they are medicine that the body is actually increasing body temperature internally, heat shock proteins, which are causing the body and the brain to work very hard. And turns out that is able to reduce symptoms of autism. It's able to detoxify benzene from the lungs. It's able to regulate insulin levels, all through this, magical properties of the plant being so powerful to to operate. So if we think about where to get started, get some organic sprouting seeds, get a jar or tray, and start adding water, following directions. There's probably forget about me. People have been sprouting long before me.
Sure.
I was just the guy that was monomaniacal, who had the time on his hands and who had the vision to think big, to think that sprouts were more than a garnish. They were more than a hippie food. They were more than something you'd find in Asian cuisine, but that sprouts were something that could become a thing.
Yeah.
And so that became my thing, to make sprouts a thing, which is like, why I flew here,
Yeah.
to do this podcast,
Yeah.
to share this message.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you did. And I do want to ask you about the sprouting company. Will you talk a little bit about what it is and what your vision for that is?
I mean, it's really basic. It's the fact is that sprouts have been underserved. They've been like the stepchild of nutrients, and of food. And I just, hallucinated that no one was like taking the baton, and leading the charge. So I thought that I would organize, some of the brightest minds, of science, of nutrition, of medical and health and recipes and industrial design and product design and farmers. So I've just been spending the last 5 years not only writing and sharing about sprouts, but working with how this can become more accessible, more affordable, where the current tools for sprouting, a mason jar was designed for canning. Right. And people out of necessity turned that into a tool for sprouting. And I look at that, and the critic in me is able to see what could be a little bit better, what could be a lot better, and what to do. So that's just something that, low key, I'm just working on, seeing how I can make it better. And I'll be sharing more information as it comes, but it's really about community.
Awesome.
Like creating a community around the world to support sprouting. And it's beginning right now just on social media.
Awesome.
Like I never used social media until I decided to publish content around sprouting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Doug, just the last few questions for you before we wrap up. I want to transition the conversation briefly to an exploration of writing and the creative process, right? And talk a little bit about your journey of taking your passion and your enthusiasm and all of your ideas and experience related to this and putting it between the covers of a book, right? Which I know many people will dream of writing a book, but it's only ever a dream. But you did.
Yeah, I would say I almost gave back the advance from the publisher and quit because the book was so hard for me to write. Like the resistance was so hard for me to write. And like I would sit down and I could talk about sprouts for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour at a time. But the contract was for 60,000 words.
That's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words. And I have a lot of education, just not academically and not, using the typewriter and the keys. Like this was just foreign to me. I was, a guy from the street. And so like for me to have the discipline, and then I said, I'm going to sit and I'm going to write a minimum of 500 words every day. Like I could digress and go down rabbit holes, but I'm going to write 500 words a day. I'm not going to get up to go to the bathroom. I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to drink. My phone is going to be off. It's going to be me and the screen. And I don't care if I look at the word count in Microsoft Word, every other second,
right,
until I hit 500 words, but I'm just going to write the book. And I did that 500 words every day until the book was done.
Wow. Well, and maybe that's part of what you meant when a couple of weeks ago I asked you about this. I was something I'm personally curious about, right? And when I asked you, how'd you do it? And one of the things you told me was, I had to channel my inner Goggins, your inner David Goggins.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about like where that idea came from and why and how you did that.
I mean, I did that when my wife, now then girlfriend, basically said you're like a college student procrastinating. Mm-hmm. And that just triggered me because I'm like, I'm not a college student. I don't need to procrastinate. Like, I'm the master of my fate. Like, I just need to dial in and give myself a plan and then execute my plan. Mm-hmm. Like, you asked me to do the ice bath this morning, 40 degrees. And, you said, oh, bring a swimsuit. We'll do the ice bath.
At 6:30 in the morning.
6:30. I'm like, that's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, no. Like, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do it with love and joy and pleasure and make the most of it. And I apologize for waking up your whole house, like screaming at the top of my lungs, but it felt good.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. It was great. Okay. And the last two questions I have, one is about your place in Wonder Valley.
Yeah.
So you have a number of homes, residences, Airbnbs.
A little community. We call it Wonder Valley Hot Springs.
Yeah,
a little
it's
community.
Beautiful. And I've had the privilege to visit. I was able to sit in a carved, is it marble? A marble tub?
We have some that are marble, some that are granite.
That was fed by about 115 degree hot spring water.
Yes.
Underneath the Milky Way.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. If people want to learn more about that or they want to experience that for themselves, what should they do?
Wonder Valley Hot Springs on Instagram has some beautiful pictures, or the website at wondervalleyhotsprings.com.
Awesome.
And basically, Wonder Valley is this little town that was wonderful, amazing sunrises, sunsets, the darkest skies, the brightest stars. People come from all over the country, if not the world, to stargaze. We're 15 minutes from Joshua Tree National Park. So there's spots in the park that are just like breathtaking. And so I just chose to live there.
Yeah.
And then opportunistically, I was like, oh, well, we can buy this piece of land over here next to us here and across the street over there and next to us. So we just put together, this little community and putting up on Airbnb and on our website. And
awesome.
And we get to live there,
yeah.
And I get to invite, people there, my friends, and, we've had, some of the most amazing people in the world, come visit.
Yeah. Really, really special place. I got there, and that first night I thought, maybe this is where I'll come and finish my book.
Oh yeah.
It's really peaceful.
It is, you were in the writer's cabin.
Yeah. That was awesome. Well, Doug, what advice or encouragement do you leave anybody who's watching or listening to this with?
I think that wherever you are, if you're able to hear this, you already won. You won the ovarian lottery. Like, you are here. And now I want to just encourage you that you can choose whatever path, whatever destiny that you want. And choose love, choose generosity. Like, play the game to see who could be the greatest giver.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And give to yourself too.
Yeah.
Right? And if you live with that, life just becomes just a joy.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, again, my guest today, Doug Evans, author of The Sprout Book. You can learn more about Doug on Instagram. You can visit him at dougevans.com.
Yep.
Right. And with that, Doug, thanks so much for being a guest and making time to come hang out here in Utah.
Hey, my pleasure. Brilliant. It's the best ever. So
yes.
Glad to be here.
Yes. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the School for Good Living podcast. Before you take off, I just want to extend an invitation to you. Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life still isn't working for many people. Whether it's here in the developed world where we deal with depression, anxiety, loneliness, addiction, divorce, unfulfilling jobs, or relationships that don't work, or in the developing world where so many people still don't have access to basic things like clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or they live in conflict zones. There are a lot of people on this planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, or even if your life is working, but you have the sense that it could work better, consider signing up for the School for Good Living's Transformational Coaching Program. It's something I've designed to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated, or you've gone through a divorce, or you've gotten married, headed into retirement, starting a business, been married for a long time, whatever. No matter where you are in life, this 9-month program will give you the opportunity to go deep in every area of your life, to explore life's big questions, to create answers for yourself in a community of other growth-minded individuals. And it can help you get clarity and be accountable to realize more of your unrealized potential. It can also help you find and maintain motivation. In short, it's designed to help you live with greater health, happiness, and meaning so that you can be, do, have, and give more. Visit goodliving.com to learn more or to sign up today.